Thank you so much for joining us for Face the State this morning. I'm Tracy Townsend. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. One of the biggest races in Ohio will be watched closely across the country. We're talking about the race for Senator Rob Portman's seat. Democrat Tim Ryan and Republican J.D. Vance are neck and neck. Both answered questions from a live audience during a Fox News town hall in Columbus this week. The top questions focused on how to fix inflation.
In the short term, we need a tax cut. We have to put money in people's pockets. Child tax credit, advance it. Earned income tax credit, advance it. Put it in people's bank account.
Your party.
Well, you're asking me what I'd like to do. I don't have control over everybody else. I think this is the solution. I've been screaming at Democrats too for a year and a half to pass a tax cut. That's the short term. My point was that's not going to help you today. That's why we need a tax cut. It will help us bring supply chains back. It's going to create tens of thousands of union construction jobs here. Like I said, Ohio is right in the middle of all this because once we pass that, we saw huge investments into the solar industry. Honda's putting a $4 billion battery plant there. We have a battery plant up in Youngstown. We have 5 vehicles, soon to be more at Foxconn. Natural gas in the Southeast. Like, Ohio is so primed for this. We just got to stop the stupid politics.
The Biden administration, backed by Tim, supported a lot of borrowing and spending, throwing fuel on the fire, which has caused the price of everything to go up. Now, we have to remember, Biden said that he wouldn't raise taxes on the middle class. But if you're a family right now dealing with the grocery prices and the energy prices, certainly you feel like your taxes have gone up a lot because the cost of living a good life in this country has gone up a lot. The other really crazy thing is that we really went to war against America's energy sector. So energy goes into everything, right? It goes into the diesel fuel that the trucks use to take our food to the grocery store. It goes into the manufacturing process. And so when you have energy getting so expensive, that raises the price of everything else as well. And so I think we get those two things under control. We stop the borrowing and spending, and we actually open up Ohio's energy markets, then we'll start to bring those prices under control.
Another issue that's top of mind for voters, especially women, abortion rights. Here's where the Senate candidates stand.
I happen to think it should be a little bit of a mix. In other words, 90% of abortion policy is going to be made by the state of Ohio, and I think that's absolutely the right way it should be. Ohio is going to want to have a different abortion policy from California, and I think every person in Ohio, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life like I am, absolutely should be able to make that decision. Now, there is a federal piece of legislation moving through the Senate right now, and here's what it does. Very simply, it provides reasonable exceptions, but it also sets a minimum national standard, and I think that that's a good idea. We should not in this country be aborting babies who can feel pain, who are fully formed. That's my view.
In the third term of Roe v. Wade, you could only do it if there was some kind of medical emergency. We don't want J.D. Vance and Ted Cruz and all these guys in the doctor's office.
Do you think that the Democratic bills to codify, so-called codify Roe v. Wade, have some sort of limit in them? Because we haven't seen it. The one that was in the House did not have a limit. So you have a limit.
My personal view is we go back to Roe v. Wade. We move away from this chaos that we're in now. We had 50 years of case law. We had stability. And now we have women. And we have doctors, Brett, who won't perform what they need to perform on a woman whose life is in jeopardy. And then the doctor says, I'm sorry, I have my own kids at home, and I'm not going to prison over this stuff.
When it comes to fighting crime, the candidates have different strategies.
If we get Republican majorities in Congress, the Democrats are going to be forced to work with us on a couple of things, okay? And we need to be willing to reach across the aisle and say, look, if you're willing to get things done for the sake of this country, of course we're willing to work with you. The immigration issue and the border crisis, and especially the energy crisis, I think those are two issues where Joe Biden and some of the Democrats might be willing to do some work with us. I hope that they will, because those are the two biggest crises, and they're the two most self-inflicted problems we have in our country right now.
I support making sure that judges have the right in the constitutional amendment. I'm voting yes on that, to be able, for the judges to be able to balance their decision with regard to public safety. And crime is an issue. I don't care what anybody says about that. And we need more cops, we need better paid cops, and we need to make sure that we invest into police training. And that's why we put hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into the rescue package for state and local government so that we can fund the police. Over the course of my career, I've brought back $500 million to the state of Ohio for police, for staffing, for technology. And we also have to figure out how in the hell are all these criminals getting their hands on all these guns? How does that happen?
Ohio's U.S. Senate race is one of several that could change the balance of power in Congress, which, according to our Verify team, doesn't happen often. Casey Decker explains.
Verify here with your election fast fact. Right now, Democrats control the House, Senate, and White House. But the House and Senate are up for grabs during this midterm election. So how often does the president's party lose control of a chamber of Congress during the midterms? Historically, not as often as you might think. We looked at every midterm in American history, and the president's party lost either the House or Senate in just over a third of them. But it has become a lot more common recently. We've seen such losses in the last 4 midterms in a row.
Casey Decker with our Verify report. Issue 2 will also be on the ballot. It would prevent local governments from allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections. But it would also do something else. And that's where opponents of Issue 2 believe voters are being misled. 10 TV's Kevin Landers explains.
Early voting is bringing early concerns over a proposed constitutional amendment called Issue 2.
Yeah. Was Issue 2 confusing?
Yes, it was confusing to me.
It would have been confusing the way it was written. However, I had looked into it prior to being here.
Issue 2, if passed, would do 2 things. The Republican-backed resolution would require only a U.S. citizen to vote in a state or local election, and you must be at least 18 years of age and registered to vote for at least 30 days.
Yeah, I think you have to be a citizen to vote in any election.
I feel if they're 18 by the time they are able to vote, that by law they should be able to vote in the elections.
Yeah, I think also like 17-year-olds not being able to vote isn't the biggest deal. So I don't know, I would probably vote for it.
Supporters of Issue 2 say it's important that Ohio's Constitution makes certain there are no local loopholes that could overstep the state's Constitution. The city of Yellow Springs attempted to allow non-citizens to vote, and the issue could change Ohio's Constitution from guaranteeing voting rights for, quote, every citizen to, quote, only citizens of the U.S. State Representative Mike Skindle is against Issue 2 and says it shouldn't even be on the ballot.
Non-citizens haven't voted in 204 years in the state of Ohio. In addition, if it was about locals having non-citizens voting, they could have put it in the local control provision of the Constitution.
Skindle believes Issue 2 is about voter suppression.
They tried to stop 17-year-olds from voting in presidential elections in 2016. The courts ruled that out. Now they're going to the Constitution to change it. Voters should not be changing the Constitution like that, and we should stop it.
State Representative Bill Seitz supports Issue 2. When we asked him why, he sent a statement in which he argued that allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections would be costly. Seitz said election administrators and poll workers would have to contend with 2 sets of ballots, one for federal candidates and one for state and local elections where non-citizens could also vote. Safety and security is on your ballot in Franklin County's Issue 10, Senior Services Levy Renewal. The renewal is for the Office on Aging's Senior Options Program, which focuses on helping residents who are 60 years and older with the tools it takes to maintain their independence. Services include home-delivered meals, adult daycare, transportation, emergency response, and even minor home repair. It's a $1.75 million levy, $41.13 per year on every $100,000 of assessed property value. I talked with Senior Options co-chair, former Commissioner Marilyn Brown, who says it's not an increase and a renewal of what people are in fact already paying.
I think it's a matter of getting people to understand that it's on the ballot and that it's a vote that needs to happen, more than anything. And, you know, when we know that it's a year of election where there's generally not a high turnout, we want to make sure there are people that turn out to vote and that they vote on issue 10, because this is really an important issue. Everybody knows somebody 60 or over, whether they're a neighbor, whether they're a relative or a friend. You know somebody 60 or over, and they can use the services.
And without these services, this population would just...
Without this issue, the services go away. And that would be not a very good scenario, because then those seniors would not get Meals on Wheels. They would not get the home health services. They would not get the transportation, and they would not be able to be as independent as they want to be. I mean, I've got a mother in Cleveland who's 94, and she's living as independently as she can, and yet she needs services provided. And, you know, without these levies like this, it just doesn't happen.
On election night, we'll be tracking results as they come in with live team coverage, both on air and online. 10 TV's Andrew Kinsey walks us through what to expect.
Okay, so this tool allows us to bring you real-time results in the biggest race of the night. We can highlight where each candidate is getting votes from across the state, county by county. We can even give you historical data from each race. Let's use the governor's race here, for example. Going back to 2018, when Governor Mike DeWine won. When those numbers start to come in on election night, we can see those numbers and how they stack up this time around. We can also compare data specifically to the race for the big race a lot of people will be watching, that U.S. Senate race here. So that race between Ryan and J.D. Vance. We can use a new tool we have here to compare that to where votes were given in 2020 during the presidential race then. Also giving you a little extra context. We'll also be able to update you on the battle for power in the U.S. House and Senate. The best part of this tool will also be available for you on our website, 10tv.com. So make sure you stay with us all night Tuesday for the fastest results right here on 10 TV.
Americans sometimes see voting as mundane. One Central Ohio man sees it as a mosaic, and he hopes you will paint your way to the polls.
Voting, just like self-expression in art, voting is self-expression. If you don't vote, you're not expressing yourself.
If life is art, your ballot is your canvas.
And if you're not expressing yourself, you're not helping your story.
Saeed Oladejo Lawal was born in Nigeria. Since 2009, he and his wife and children have called Columbus home.
I've always voted since we got into the U.S. and we became citizens. I've been voting since then.
Now he's joined the Greater Columbus Arts Council to spread the word about voting.
So if you don't vote, your story may not get better and you have nobody to blame but yourself.
He doesn't care which color you pick as long as you're painting.
Art is my voice. Your vote is your voice. So go use it.
This group of Ohio artists has set up a web page to help you learn more about voting and how to vote in support of those in the creative community. We'll post the link at 10tv.com. A battle over gender identity in the classroom. Why state leaders are waiting to take a vote on a Title IX resolution.
The city of Columbus wins a 3-year-long court battle over how to deal with violent crime. I'm Kevin Landers. That story next.
A divided State Board of Education met again to discuss a controversial Title IX amendment. Once again, they came to no decision. The proposed change rejects the Biden administration's new expansion of Title IX to protect transgender students. At this week's meeting, instead of voting on this amended resolution, the board president issued her own resolution. It was met with even more objections, as members complained they didn't have enough time to read it. That resolution supports parental rights and encourages the General Assembly to enforce local controls of schools, but it removed definitions of biological sex. But the board remains divided on what it should tell schools.
So we're not saying anything that the Attorney General hasn't already said. But we can't sue people. We can't make law.
Denying the reality of biological sex destroys foundational truths upon which education rests and irreparably damages children. What does that mean?
Does everyone know that there's never been a single state or district or school in the history of Title IX that has actually lost federal funds?
Now, if it can't come to a vote in November, the board will have another meeting in December. A battle is brewing over who should be allowed to make gun laws. Columbus City leaders say they should be able to do it, but the state disagrees. This week, a judge's ruling, at least for now, gave the power to the city to address everything from mandating gun locks to banning assault rifles. 10 TV's Kevin Landers reports the back and forth involves your safety.
Despite the state's attempt to block it, a Franklin County judge ruled in favor of the city of Columbus to develop its own rules on how to curb gun violence. For one mother who lost a son, she believes it's time for cities to take the lead.
My son was killed on September 16th of 2021. They were trying to rob him, and at that point is when a gun was pulled and they shot him.
The mother of Bryce Persang says the pain of losing her son to gun violence has had a ripple effect on her family all the way down to her nephew.
Every time there is a news story about someone being shot and killed, he always asks if they're talking about his uncle. And he's 8. These are things he shouldn't know.
Catherine Persang applauds a judge's ruling that would allow Columbus to consider everything from mandating gun locks to banning assault rifles as a way to curb gun violence.
We really need to come together collectively and try to figure out a solution to this, because we are losing our youth, and that is our future.
Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein sued the state to allow the city to set its own laws.
An assault weapon ban is something that the city of Columbus can now consider, and it's something I certainly would support.
The news was met with strong resistance from gun supporters like the Buckeye Firearms Association. This is yet another attempt by the city of Columbus to override state law and pass gun control laws they have no right to pass. The whole idea of having statewide preemption regarding firearms is to provide one consistent set of laws throughout the state, rather than a patchwork of laws that will entrap and confuse people and infringe on their Second Amendment rights.
Starting with something simple as a lockbox, which prior to this ruling, we couldn't even touch to try to even have the conversation. That's how devoid of common sense some of these laws out of the state legislature are.
As for Catherine Persang, she says gun violence robbed her of the son she never saw grow up and hopes no other family has to live with that memory.
We live with the fact that we never truly will know the man that he would have become.
Catherine Persang says her son's murder remains unsolved, but was told by police they do have 2 suspects. Reporting from downtown Columbus, Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
And something else Columbus City leaders are considering is limiting how food carts operate in the short north. The proposed changes are positioned as a way to prevent criminal activity. As 10 TV's Richard Solomon learned, some people are concerned it would detract from nightlife.
The best way to learn is to listen.
I think they are a little bit of a nuisance.
And understand what people are saying.
A city without street meat isn't a safer street.
For close to an hour, one by one, they talked.
Long, noisy lines form. People then sit on the sidewalk or in the flower beds to eat, many leaving greasy food and trash.
And they listened. The chambers of Columbus City Council held a hearing for 2 proposals that some feel would change nightlife in the city. What took center stage was the mobile food vendor proposal. It would shorten the hours of operation from 3 a.m. to 2 a.m., as well as restrict where carts can set up. Adam Wallace owns several food carts that set up in the short north. He says cutting down that 1 hour alone could impact his sales by 80%.
Street vendors themselves are often not the source. On the contrary, conscientious vendors work hard to keep their stalls clean and preserve and provide eyes and ears to help deter crime in the streets.
The proposal comes after several crimes happened in the short north this past summer, including fatal shootings. Columbus Police Sergeant Joseph Kermode coordinates the Short North Crime Interdictions Program. He says they've seen a lot of violent crime happen near the vendors because it's a popular place people gather once they leave the bar. He says too many times they've dealt with vendors that haven't closed down at 3 a.m.
Vendors that block the sidewalk are too close to exits of bars or blocking crosswalks, making people that are waiting in line stand in the street and get hit by cars. So they're not being targeted or attacked. These are safety concerns for the community that we've had to address.
Others say noise is an issue too, saying bars and loud music can disrupt peace. Many voices were heard, hoping their suggestions will be taken into consideration.
Please don't change the legislation to make it harder for us to thrive.
The next hearing for the noise and mobile food vendor proposal is tentatively set for December 6th. Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost says he's working to hold Dollar General accountable for what he claims are price discrepancies. Yost says he's received several complaints about Ohioans being charged prices that are more expensive than advertised. The AG is seeking monetary payments as well as court intervention to prevent further issues. Right now, political candidates have campaign ads running that promote their endorsements. Up next, the Verify team looks at whether churches can endorse candidates. Candidates often seek endorsements to bolster their campaigns, but a viral tweet claims churches cannot endorse politicians. Brandon Lewis from our National Verify team looks into that.
In some ways, churches have one of the best deals on federal taxes. They neither have to pay them nor file annual paperwork. But a tweet with 10,000 likes claims they can lose their tax-exempt status by backing a political candidate. So let's verify. Can the IRS revoke the tax-exempt status of churches that endorse candidates? Our sources are the IRS, the Johnson Amendment of 1954, Clergy Financial Resources, the United Church of Christ, the California Catholic Conference, and Grace Communion International. In 1954, Congress passed the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits churches, charities, and most other tax-exempt organizations from endorsing candidates. If they do, then they risk losing their tax-exempt status. The IRS says generally these organizations can't show preference for a candidate, but a leader can, if it's clear they're speaking as an individual. This means they can't use official titles or church resources like the pulpit, newsletter, or website to make their endorsement. Our sources note politicians can speak to congregants, but all candidates must be given the same opportunity. So, yes, the IRS can revoke the tax-exempt status of churches that endorse candidates, although it's a lengthy process, and the only time the IRS successfully revoked a church's tax-exempt status was in 1992, when Branch Ministries sponsored newspaper ads urging Christians not to vote for Bill Clinton. The United Church of Christ and the IRS note under the rules, churches are allowed to take positions on public policy issues such as abortion or immigration without endorsing specific candidates. With your Verify, I'm Brandon Lewis.
Congratulations are in order for 12 of Central Ohio's best and brightest corporate, academic, and nonprofit leaders. Women for Economic Leadership and Development held its annual calendar reception last Thursday at the Ohio State House. Each November, WELD honors 12 women who are making bold moves through mentoring, their expertise, and influence. WELD CEO Barb Smoot told me that the organization chooses to have the event in November for a reason.
And intentionally, we have this event very early in November, just as a reminder, as people look to make a decision when they're at the ballot box. You know, we're not for just R or D or I or anything in between. We're about outstanding leadership. And there's always a choice that people can make, whether they're selecting a leader in a company, a leader in government, or a leader of a nonprofit. Be thoughtful about who you select to represent you and who you select to lead your organization. Our calendar honorees come from public organizations, they come from private organizations and nonprofits. So wherever you look, there are talented women.
And we say congratulations to all of the WELD calendar representatives. Thank you all for joining us here today on Face the State. We wish you a great week.